Yeah, you. Come a little closer. I've got something really interesting to tell you. It's about economic liberty for Main Street. It's about democratizing our money. It's about stopping foreclosures and restoring prosperity. And it's all done with a simple, proven legal solution. It's called public banking. No, don't touch that dial. I know you're like most people probably, just banking is like, who wants to know anything about banking? It's boring. And economics, it's confusing and boring. But it's actually really interesting when you get the straight truth about public banking. And I've got for you a fabulous 8-minute video done by the Public Banking Institute. I think you'll really enjoy. Here it goes.
With all due respect for everyone's sacred cows, let's cut to the chase. Our current financial troubles are largely the result of an institutionalized deception that says that there isn't enough money to provide for public needs because our national debt is too big, while at the same time feeding all the money it wants to one particular sector of political and financial control, the sacred cow of Wall Street. That sector is the big private banks, financial speculators, and their colleagues at the Federal Reserve. These are the folks who run the monetary show, deciding who benefits, how much, and how the money supply is managed in our society. In reality, America has plenty of money. It's just that it's in the control of private banks rather than the American public. The wealth of America should belong to its citizens, not just its banks and corporations, as community banker George Bailey pointed out to his customers.
You're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to build, and then they're going to pay it back to you as best they can. Now, what are you going to do, foreclose on them?
We need to take back control of America's money. Here's the interesting thing about money. It's all made up. Really. Money doesn't represent a pile of gold somewhere or some physical commodity. Banks don't go into a vault to pull out cash that they have lying around. They literally create money when they provide loans. Money is merely a representation of debt, and this debt materializes, voila, by the stroke of a bank's digital keyboard. When a business or a government needs more money to keep things moving, a necessity for any growing enterprise, it can create more money by taking on more debt. In the context of our current private banking system, economic vitality and growth require new debt. No debt, no growth. The privilege to issue money and control its supply was once reserved as the sole right of sovereign nations rather than private interests. Today, however, the folks who manage the money flow are private parties solely interested in profit. Their main agent is the Federal Reserve, the Fed. Now, most folks think the Fed is an agency of the government. Not so. The Federal Reserve System consists of 12 Federal Reserve banks, all of them owned by other private banks, as one of their lawyers clarified in court.
Each Federal Reserve Bank, the stock is owned by the member banks in the district, 100% privately held. They have private boards of directors. Majority of those boards are appointed by the independent banks, private banks in the district. They are not agencies. They have no rule-making authority, and they do not have adjudic authority.
So the Fed is actually independent of public control, even though its policies affect the entire country. Indeed, the whole world. The Fed serves the banks that own it, and its biggest owners are the too-big-to-fail banks. For example, after receiving trillions of dollars in nearly free credit surrounding the bailout of 2008, the banks had no obligation to share that money with the public. Instead, bank lending actually plummeted, starving small businesses, causing catastrophic shrinkage of employment and cancellation of public services. During this same 2.5-year period, the Fed advanced over $16 trillion in short-term credit to domestic and foreign private banks that were foundering from their own reckless policies. The American public and small businesses received just 1/16 of this gigantic sum for their economic stimulus in 2008 and 2009. And here's how much of that $16 trillion the Fed would have had to advance to cover all the painful state budget shortfalls following the bank-generated crisis. But the Fed said, we can't help. It's not our job. Think about that for a minute. The $16 trillion the Fed created with just a few keystrokes and advanced to private banks is greater than the entire accumulated debt of the United States in its 235-year history. The Fed did this without public discussion or a vote. Indeed, the Fed shielded this transaction from public view. Money that could have secured the public interest was instead diverted to shore up private interests. The result? An unprecedented transfer of wealth to the richest segment of society. The public was left holding the bag, while bank profits and salaries continued to grow and selfish banking practices continued. And it's not just here in America. Monetary control by a network of private banks is a global fact of life that has thrown entire nations into the financial abyss. Is there an alternative? Yes. The first order of business is to take back control of public money from private interests. One proven way is called public banking, banks owned by the public and dedicated to serving the people. A public bank manages public revenues for public purposes. Its shareholders are the people. Its growth feeds the public sector. It helps create local financial sovereignty and security, lowers taxes and community project costs, expands employment, and helps local businesses thrive. The proof of these claims is almost 100 years old. The Bank of North Dakota, the only publicly owned bank in the United States. It has been largely responsible for that state's sizable budget surplus, low taxes, high employment rate, failure-free bank history, and vibrant economic environment. And perhaps most telling, the financial debacle of 2008 had no effect on North Dakota because its money was invested at home, on Main Street, not on Wall Street. And another important thing, you know that deficit so many politicians are screaming about? With publicly owned banks, accumulated debt can be rolled over when and for as long as necessary. Why? Because public debt owed to a publicly owned bank is interest-free. It never actually has to be repaid at all. Since most money today is created as a debt, the public debt is our money. Imagine what states would look like today if they hadn't entrusted over $1 trillion of their tax revenues to Wall Street. Pension funds could be secure, infrastructure projects and public services could be supported and enhanced, and jobs would be a natural part of a vibrant, affordable credit environment, just like in North Dakota. This is why we need to take control of our money. The existing system, this institutionalized deception that our democratic government controls the creation of public money, needs to be replaced. Public banking, banking in the public interest, is the proven alternative. There's a growing movement underway right now to expand public banking all across America. With your support, it can take hold in your community and state. Visit publicbankinginstitute.org to sign up and help your community reclaim control of our money. After all, it is our money and our democracy.
So, wasn't that really interesting? I thought that was a hell of a video. I'm Pamela Hall, and I'm from Nevada County, occupied Nevada County, and this is my friend Jed Biaggi. Right. And our opinions are our own. They might be yours too. But about the Bank of North Dakota, it has the lowest unemployment rate in the state, and it has been able to do some phenomenal things because the underlying purpose of the Bank of North Dakota is for the good of the people of North Dakota. Actually, in my idea, I would like to have our Public Bank of California be good for the people and the environment. But anyway, they still want to make a profit, but it has to be a profit that serves the people of North Dakota, not just the basic bottom line profit. So that's a huge difference. And one of the things that can happen with that is when there was a huge flood in the Red River Valley, it was right on the state line. And on the North Dakota side, the bank stepped in. They gave people credit to do things right away to recover. And when FEMA came into the question, or to the situation much later, they just reimbursed, they got reimbursed by FEMA, but Bank of North Dakota was there first. And to this day, on the other side of the boundary, the other city is still blighted, and it shows the scarring of that flood. But on the North Dakota side, it's a thriving community. So what do you think about that? Would you like to have a public bank?
It sounds very interesting that you can get some immediate response from your banking institution. That part's very nice. I also like the idea that all of the banking fees or things that would be associated with a regular standard bank in which everything would be going to a central bank owned by a private and then sent off to Wall Street, basically. All of that is gone, and that's the part that I find really exciting about a community bank or a county bank or a state bank, something owned at a local level by the public. That ensures a lot of capturing all of the local dollars and making sure it doesn't bleed off to some central elite area somewhere far away.
Yeah, in fact, we have some really good charts that we'd like to show you that demonstrate that really clearly.
Okay, and the first chart that we have actually describes what I was just saying. It very much shows in a picture-wise what the system really is today. So it shows an example of how the money is paid to a central private organization, siphoned off to a central Wall Street, and then we get parts of it back. And that's really what this first chart's about. And the second chart will show the alternative system, in which will show a better benefit for us. And why don't you describe the second chart?
Okay, so the taxpayer pays their taxes to the state, their state taxes, and that revenue goes to the state bank, and then that state bank invests the money into state projects of all kinds. And it's going to cost a lot less because about 40 to 60% of every construction dollar is interest. But since this is the state bank, paying money to have it done, we don't have to pay any interest for using our own state money. And the profits from those projects go back to the state. And plus those projects employ people of the state. So they make more money. And then we get more money back into the system because those people are paying tax on their money. And it keeps all the money flowing in the state of North Dakota. And it's all for the benefit of the people. It's not to make people in Wall Street who are doing nothing worthwhile to society at all, doing nothing for them. It's taking our money back from their control.
Right, so that's something that I call that Wall Street stuff that they're creating over there, a phantom wealth thing. And it's been used by a number of people. It's a phantom wealth. It's something that they create out of our work that we're doing locally. They siphon some money off of the work that we're doing. They try and play some money games over here, and they try and create this credit and debt. And it's part of eliminating that process of phantom wealth. When they go and they create all that phantom wealth and they send it out into the system, all it really does is it dilutes all of the actual real wealth that we have locally. So eliminating that extra loot will also, just by that very vicarious process, will make us self-sufficient just right there.
Yeah, in fact, there's a woman who specializes in state banking, and she said it takes about a year to really turn around the whole finances of a state once they've adopted state banking. But actually, even a smaller entities like the state of the California State Colleges system or community banks and city banks can also effectively use public banking. And one of the things people are worried about is having enough, where do we get the funds to start a state bank? Well, it turns out that the state of California has rainy day funds that they have to keep on hand and not spend because it has to be there for rainy days. And so they invested in Wall Street banks and commercial banks, and they get a very small percentage. It's actually 0.49% interest on this money. And there's a lot of it. It's about $17 billion. And instead, if we have this public state bank, we can put that into the state bank, and from something that's called fractional reserve banking, which is the way it all works, is they can actually lend out 9 times what the capital and the assets that they have in the bank. So if they have $10 billion in the state bank, that allows them to loan out to local businesses $100 billion. So you can see how that creates a lot of prosperity that people really deserve to have.
I think we'll do more of the assets, the creation asset in another area. So we're going to spend more time in another show and really get into how those assets can be created and building that asset base for the bank. I would like to also point out that we've been mentioning that in our country we have one good example of a publicly owned bank, but there also have been other instances, and they're existing right now today. And people would point to their economies right now and say that they're doing very well, ignoring the fact that they are underwritten by a public bank. For instance, Australia is doing very well right now, and they have a public bank, a mix of public and private, as does Germany. Mix of public and private, very self-sufficient in their area. Brazil, same thing, a mix of public and private banks. So we have some good examples, not only at a state level within our country, but of around the world, that it really helps prosperity stay local. There are further examples, and I'll even name them, but some people start to say, oh, well, there's other things. Like China has a centralized bank. There's no private enterprise to compete with it, but it's just another example of how everyone knows that China's economy is banging right now and is going crazy. A lot of that has to do with a lot of external forces, but they do have a public bank that maintains and keeps all of their assets centralized. So we have some great examples out there that we can build a structure and form off of, and I think it's very exciting, and there's no reason to not explore at any level, especially at a community level, which is what would be nice to have a county bank in our area. And we're in a special circumstance where Nevada County is devoid of any county banks. We had one. We had a community bank, but it went under, right? How long ago was that?
Was it a year and a half ago?
About a year and a half ago, I think, somewhere around there. Our bank, basically due to all of the credit issues that have been going on with the loss of property and assets not being able to back up, basically our bank folded in our area. And we seriously have a void and need something to keep our money local and continue growing our local economy. So I think it's a very interesting idea and fits in very perfectly for us.
Yeah, actually, Jen and I have had the same experience. When we started getting into this information, we're just getting so interested in this, just gobbling up all the information. And Jen was saying, I just can't believe I'm interested in banking and economics. And it's the same with me. I mean, I'm an art major, I'm a chiropractor. I mean, don't even like numbers, let alone banking or economics. But this is really interesting. I have one correction, though, for you. I think it's the Kiwi country, New Zealand, that has a public bank rather than Australia. And also, Japan has a public bank.
That's true.
Yeah. And one of the things that people are often concerned about is that they are afraid that local smaller banks will resent having a public bank. But actually in North Dakota, there is a community bank association, and they really benefit a lot from having a public state bank because the state bank, public bank, acts like a sort of a mini Fed, and it has a larger sum of capital. So when someone comes to a local bank and wants to borrow some money for a business, you know, a lot of times the smaller banks don't have enough capital to make that loan, and then they'll have to go to a commercial bank, pay a lot of money for it, and but when they have the state bank, which is all set up to serve them, they can help them make that loan. And it's also good because the local bankers are the ones who really know their customers. They know which business people have how they relate to the community, how well their business is doing. So they know a lot more than just their credit score. Whereas when you're up in some other area, and all you know about a business is maybe their credit score, you're more likely to make a mistake. So they have not had any bank failures in North Dakota for at least 10 years. They're doing really well with that. So community banks, you don't need to be afraid. Even small commercial banks, you don't need to be afraid of a public state bank. It's actually an asset.
I'd really like to reiterate what you said, and the fact that what a public bank will also do is it will open up a market. And what we exist in right now is really, we try to say we'd like to have an open market and a free market for people to participate in, but our structure said right now really does not allow participation by everybody. Opening up this public bank will allow a true free market in that anybody that wants to will be able to participate much more easily and contribute to the building of their local economy. That's really, I think, another big benefit of this proposition.
Another thing is that the bankers have not been making loans to small businesses for quite some time now. Even businesses that have excellent credit ratings, they have just closed off the spigot on loans. And as you can know from that video you watched, that 95% of our currency is introduced into circulation through bank loans. So if the banks say no more credit, it's like, this is what happens. We have unemployment, we have foreclosures, and the whole economy just tanks. And then those banks can buy up the cheap, underpriced properties.
I was curious, and because I've been talking to people that are really worried about lawmakers having control of our money and how it's going to be handled. So I'm curious, actually, how's this going to be run? Is it going to be run in just a haphazard way, or what? I mean...
Well, no, not at all. It's actually run by professional bankers, and sometimes legislators have been known to try and make a little pressure on the public bankers, but you have to hire people who are, have integrity. And one of the things that helps is there's a lot of transparency in the way the public bank is structured, and all the employees are state employees or city or county employees, so they're not making big bonuses, so that helps too.
So it sounds like they're still as strict, but there's a little more transparency, and in fact we can monitor it a little more.
Yeah, and actually when you think about it, who would you want to run your bank? Would you want them run by the kind of professional bankers that we have now?
Right.
You're worried about it. Look what we've got. We can, it's very easy to do better than what we've got right now because, for one thing, the public banks have cut off the spigot on credit for small businesses. And so actually, in the last 3 to 4 years, there's been about, $13 trillion or something like that has been sucked out of our economy that's not circulating anymore. Remember that bank loans are the primary way that 95% of our money gets into circulation. Well, we are being turned, America is being turned into a third world country by the bankers. So we really need to take control of our money.
That's right. I think that's a great, it's a great example of what we really should be doing where we're working. So we're going to be covering a little more of this in another episode, and I think that we're going to focus a little more on the foreclosure aspects. Is that what we're going to be doing?
Yeah.
What's your plan coming up?
Next week, we're going to tell you about a simple 2-step solution to stopping the foreclosure fraud. And it involves having a county public bank, which we can do right here in Nevada County. And I'm really hoping we can bring that out. It would have all the benefits of a public bank plus stopping foreclosures. And in California, we're having 1,000 foreclosures a day. So we really got to get going on this. It's really urgent. And then also, I want to let you know that there is going to be an inaugural American Public Banking Conference in Philadelphia soon. It's April 27th and 28th, and this is going to be a historic event. So if any of you can get out there, I think it'll be fascinating. But you can also, for $45, you can sign up to get a live feed in to see it. You can find that on the Public Banking Institute, and the website for the American Public Banking Conference should be on your screen now. And also, you can join our local Occupy Nevada County. And if you're interested in what we're doing right now, you can join our special working group, which is the Economic Liberty for Main Street Working Group. And that's about it. I want you to see some more of this video, and see you next week.
Sometimes I like the city, yeah, the lights can be fine. Sometimes I like I-80 when it starts to